The couch felt smaller than it had moments before, the distance between them shrinking with each passing second as Samuel Johnson's eyes searched Jason Smith's face in the dim lamplight. The confession hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Yet here they were, standing at its edge. Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs as Jason's hand found his, fingers intertwining with a certainty that made his breath catch. "I missed us before life got busy," Jason had whispered, his voice barely audible above the soft hum of the heater. And then, without another word, he had scooted closer, closing the gap that had existed between them for months, maybe years. The movement was deliberate yet gentle, like he was afraid Samuel might disappear if he moved too quickly. Samuel felt the warmth radiating from Jason's body, the familiar scent of his cologne mixing with something distinctly him. This was the moment he had dreamed about during countless sleepless nights, the moment that had played out in his mind in 1,000 different ways. But none of his imagined scenarios had prepared him for the reality of Jason's thumb brushing across his knuckles, or the way his eyes seemed to hold entire conversations without a single word being spoken. "Jason?" Samuel breathed, his voice cracking slightly on the name he had spoken so many times before. But never like this, never with this weight of possibility hanging between them. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you're watching from and hype this video in the comments. This story has been building to this moment, and you won't believe where it goes from here. But to understand how they arrived at this precipice, how two best friends found themselves balanced and on the edge of something that could either destroy everything they had built or transform it into something beautiful, we need to go back. Back to when the distance between them had been measured not in inches, but in the careful space they maintained to protect a friendship that meant everything to both of them. 3 months earlier, Samuel had been sitting in this same spot on the couch, watching Jason pace back and forth across the living room of their shared apartment. Jason's hair was disheveled from running his hands through it, a nervous habit Samuel had cataloged along with dozens of others over their 2 years of friendship. The source of Jason's agitation was sprawled across the coffee table in the form of his phone, which had been buzzing incessantly with messages from his girlfriend of 8 months, Michelle Baker. "She wants to know where this is going," Jason said, his voice tight with frustration. "She's talking about moving in together, about meeting her parents, about the future. And I just..." He stopped pacing and turned to face Samuel, his hands falling to his sides in defeat. "I don't know what to tell her." Samuel shifted uncomfortably, pulling a throw pillow into his lap and gripping it tighter than necessary. This conversation had become a familiar ritual over the past few weeks, with Jason seeking advice about a relationship that seemed to cause him more stress than joy. As his best friend, Samuel knew he was supposed to offer wisdom, to help Jason navigate the complexities of love and commitment. What Jason didn't know was that every word of relationship advice felt like a knife turning in Samuel's chest. "What do you want to tell her?" Samuel asked, proud of how steady his voice sounded despite the turmoil churning inside him. Jason slumped into the armchair across from the couch, his head falling back against the cushion as he stared at the ceiling. "That's just it. I don't know what I want. Michelle is great. She really is. She's smart and funny and beautiful, and on paper we make perfect sense together. But something's missing, something I can't quite put my finger on." Samuel's grip on the pillow tightened. He knew exactly what was missing, had known for months as he watched Jason go through the motions of a relationship that looked right from the outside but left him feeling empty. The missing piece was sitting right here on this couch, had been here all along, but Samuel couldn't say that, couldn't risk destroying the most important relationship in his life for the slim chance that Jason might feel the same way. "Maybe you just need more time," Samuel offered, hating himself for the words even as they left his mouth. "Relationships are complicated. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out what you really want." Jason's head rolled to the side so he could look at Samuel directly. There was something in his expression, a searching quality that made Samuel's pulse quicken. "What about you? You've been single for, 6 months now? Don't you ever think about settling down with someone?" The question hit Samuel like a physical blow. He thought about it constantly, dreamed about it, ached for it with every fiber of his being. But the someone he imagined settling down with was sitting 3 feet away, asking him for advice about another person entirely. "I'm in no rush," Samuel said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack his face. "I figure when the right person comes along, I'll know." "How will you know, though?" Jason pressed, leaning forward in his chair. "I mean, what if the right person has been there all along and you just haven't recognized it?" Samuel's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, just a moment, he allowed himself to believe that Jason was talking about them, that this conversation was heading somewhere other than another discussion about Michelle Baker. But then Jason's phone buzzed again, and the spell was broken. "That's her again," Jason sighed, reaching for the device. "I should probably call her back." "Yeah," Samuel agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You should." That night, Samuel lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the muffled sounds of Jason's phone conversation through the thin walls. He could hear the rise and fall of Jason's voice, the occasional laugh, the long pauses that suggested Michelle was doing most of the talking. Samuel pressed his pillow over his face and tried to block out the sounds, but they seemed to echo in his skull long after Jason had finally hung up. This was his life now, he realized. Playing the supportive best friend while watching the person he loved build a future with someone else. It was a special kind of torture, one that he had signed up for the moment he decided that having Jason in his life as a friend was better than not having him at all. The next few weeks passed in a blur of carefully maintained normalcy. Samuel perfected the art of listening to Jason's relationship troubles with an expression of concerned friendship while dying a little inside with each conversation. He offered advice that he hoped would help Jason find happiness, even if that happiness didn't include him. He celebrated Jason's small victories and commiserated with his frustrations, all while keeping his own feelings locked away in a place so deep that sometimes he almost forgot they existed. Almost. It was during one of their regular Friday night movie marathons that the first crack appeared in Samuel's carefully constructed facade. They had settled on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between them, arguing good-naturedly about whether to watch an action movie or a comedy. Jason had won, as he usually did, and they were 20 minutes into an explosion-heavy blockbuster when Jason's phone rang. "It's Michelle," Jason said, glancing at the screen with an expression that looked more resigned than excited. "I should take this." Samuel paused the movie and watched as Jason stepped out onto their small balcony to take the call. Through the glass door, he could see Jason's silhouette against the city lights, could see the tension in his shoulders as the conversation progressed. Whatever Michelle was saying, it wasn't making Jason happy. When Jason returned 15 minutes later, his face was drawn and his usual easy smile was nowhere to be found. He collapsed back onto the couch with a heavy sigh, running both hands through his hair. "Everything okay?" Samuel asked, though he could already guess the answer. "She wants to take a break," Jason said, his voice flat. "Says she needs space to think about what she really wants. Apparently, I've been distant lately, and she's tired of feeling like she's the only one invested in this relationship." Samuel felt a traitorous flutter of hope in his chest and immediately hated himself for it. "I'm sorry, man. That sucks." "The thing is," Jason continued, turning to face Samuel with a look of confusion, "I'm not sure I'm upset about it. Shouldn't I be devastated? Shouldn't I be fighting for her, trying to convince her to stay? But all I feel is relief." The admission hung between them like a confession, and Samuel found himself leaning slightly forward, drawn by the vulnerability in Jason's voice. Relief can be a normal response to the end of a relationship, especially if things weren't working. "But that's just it," Jason said, his eyes searching Samuel's face as if looking for answers. "Things were working on paper. We never fought. We had fun together. The physical chemistry was there. So why did it always feel like I was playing a role? Like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't?" Samuel's heart began to race. This was dangerous territory, the kind of conversation that could lead places he wasn't sure either of them was ready to go. But Jason was looking at him with such raw honesty, such trust, that Samuel couldn't bring himself to deflect or change the subject. "Maybe you weren't pretending to be someone else," Samuel said carefully. "Maybe you were just trying to fit into an idea of who you thought you should be." Jason was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his hands. When he looked up again, there was something different in his expression. something that made Samuel's breath catch. "Can I ask you something?" Jason said, his voice softer than before. Samuel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Have you ever been in love with someone you couldn't have?" The question hit Samuel like a physical blow, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. Jason was looking at him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if all his carefully hidden feelings were written across his face in bold letters. "Yes," Samuel whispered, the word escaping before he could stop it. "What did it feel like?" Samuel closed his eyes, trying to find words for something he had never allowed himself to fully acknowledge, let alone describe. Like drowning and flying at the same time. Like every moment with them was a gift and a punishment. Like I was living half a life, always watching from the sidelines of my own story. When he opened his eyes, Jason was staring at him with an expression of recognition that made Samuel's chest tight with panic. Had he said too much? Had he given himself away? "That's exactly it," Jason breathed. "That's exactly how I've been feeling." But I couldn't put it into words. Samuel's mind raced, trying to process what Jason was saying. Was he talking about Michelle, about someone else? The possibility that he might be talking about Samuel himself seemed too dangerous to even consider. "Who is it?" Samuel asked, his voice barely audible. Jason's eyes dropped to the space between them on the couch, to where Samuel's hand rested on the cushion just inches from his own. When he looked up again, there was something raw and frightened in his expression. "I think you know," he whispered. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge that neither of them was quite ready to cross. Samuel felt the world tilt on its axis, felt everything he thought he knew about his life rearrange itself into new and terrifying possibilities. "Jason," he started, but Jason shook his head. "I know this is crazy. I know it changes everything. And maybe I shouldn't be saying it, but I can't pretend anymore. I've been measuring every relationship against what I have with you, and they all come up short. Every single one." Samuel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. This was everything he had dreamed of hearing, but it was also his worst nightmare, because now they couldn't go back. Now they couldn't pretend that this conversation had never happened, that these words had never been spoken. "How long?" Samuel asked, his voice cracking on the words. "How long have I known, or how long have I felt it?" "Both." Jason was quiet for a moment, his fingers playing with the edge of a throw pillow. "I think I've felt it for months, maybe longer. But I only started admitting it to myself recently. When Michelle and I would be together, I'd find myself thinking about you, wishing you were there instead of her, wondering what it would be like to hold your hand, to kiss you, and to wake up next to you." Samuel's breath hitched at the confession, at the raw honesty in Jason's voice. All those nights he had lain awake imagining scenarios just like this, and now it was actually happening. Jason was sitting 3 feet away, telling him everything he had longed to hear. "And you?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you known?" Samuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. 2 years and 4 months, since the day we moved in together and you made me coffee that first morning. You were wearing that ridiculous Batman t-shirt, and you had bedhead, and you were so proud of remembering how I like my coffee, and I realized I was in love with you. 2 years, Jason repeated, his voice filled with something that sounded like awe. "You've been carrying this for 2 years?" "I didn't have a choice. You were with Michelle, and before her there was Sarah, and before Sarah there was Jessica. There was always someone else, and I told myself that being your friend was enough, that I'd rather have you in my life as a friend than risk losing you completely." Jason reached out then, his fingers brushing against Samuel's hand. The touch was electric, sending shockwaves up Samuel's arm and straight to his heart. "You wouldn't have lost me. You could never lose me." "Couldn't I?" Samuel asked, finally allowing all his fear and vulnerability to show. "What happens now, Jason? What happens to us?" Jason's thumb traced across Samuel's knuckles, the gesture so tender it made Samuel's chest ache. "I don't know. I'm scared, if I'm being honest. I've never felt this way about a man before. I don't know what it means or where it leads or how to navigate any of this." "I'm scared too," Samuel admitted. "Terrified, actually, because this could either be the best thing that's ever happened to us or it could destroy everything we've built. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them staring at their joined hands as if they held the answers to all their questions. The movie continued to play on the television, forgotten, its soundtrack providing a surreal backdrop to the most important conversation of Samuel's life. "Can I tell you something?" Jason said finally. Samuel nodded. "Earlier tonight, when Michelle called to say she wanted a break, my first thought wasn't about her at all. It was about you, about how I could finally stop pretending, stop trying to force something that was never going to work. And then I felt guilty for being relieved, because Michelle deserves better than someone who's in love with his best friend." The words sent a jolt of electricity through Samuel's entire body. Jason had said it out loud, had used the word love in connection with him. It felt surreal, like something out of one of his dreams. "You're in love with me?" Samuel asked, needing to hear it again, needing to be sure. Jason's eyes met his, steady and certain, despite the fear Samuel could see lurking in their depths. "Yes, I'm in love with you, Samuel Johnson. I think I have been for a long time, but I was too scared to admit it, even to myself." Samuel felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked away for so long he had forgotten it was there. "I love you too. God, Jason, I love you so much it hurts sometimes." The confession seemed to unlock something between them, and suddenly the careful distance they had been maintaining felt unbearable. Jason shifted closer on the couch, his free hand coming up to cup Samuel's face. His thumb brushed across Samuel's cheekbone, and Samuel leaned into the touch like a plant turning toward the sun. "I want to kiss you," Jason whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I've wanted to kiss you for so long." "Then why don't you?" Samuel asked, his own voice barely audible. Jason's answer was to close the remaining distance between them, his lips meeting Samuel's in a kiss that was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as Samuel responded with all the pent-up longing he had been carrying for 2 years. Jason tasted like the popcorn they had been sharing, and something uniquely him, something Samuel wanted to memorize and hold on to forever. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Jason rested his forehead against Samuel's. "Wow," he breathed. "Yeah," Samuel agreed, his voice shaky. "Wow." They stayed like that for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, both of them trying to process what had just happened. Samuel felt like he was floating, like he might drift away if Jason wasn't anchoring him to the earth. "What do we do now?" Samuel asked, echoing his earlier question. "I don't know," Jason admitted. "I've never done this before. I don't know how to be in love with a man, how to navigate a relationship that's so different from anything I've ever experienced." "We figure it out together," Samuel said, the words coming from a place of certainty he didn't know he possessed. "We take it one day at a time, one moment at a time. We don't have to have all the answers right now." Jason smiled then, the first genuine smile Samuel had seen from him in weeks. "Together. I like the sound of that." "Me too," Samuel said, leaning in to kiss him again, softer this time, more certain. This kiss was different from the first, less desperate and more exploratory. Samuel could feel Jason's smile against his lips, could feel the way Jason's hand tightened in his hair. When they broke apart this time, Jason didn't pull away. Instead, he settled back against the couch and pulled Samuel with him, arranging them so that Samuel was tucked against his side, his head resting on Jason's shoulder. "Is this okay?" Jason asked, his voice uncertain. Samuel looked up at him, taking in the worry lines around his eyes, the way his teeth worried at his lower lip. "More than okay, it's perfect." They stayed like that for the rest of the night, talking in whispers about everything and nothing, about their fears and their hopes and the strange new territory they were entering together. Samuel told Jason about all the times he had wanted to reach for him, all the moments when he had to bite back words of love and longing. Jason told him about the growing dissatisfaction he had felt in his relationships, the nagging sense that something was missing, the way he had started comparing every woman he dated to Samuel and finding them lacking. "I kept telling myself it was because we were such good friends," Jason said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on Samuel's arm. "I thought I was just looking for someone who understood me the way you do, who made me laugh the way you do. I didn't realize I was looking for you." "And now?" Samuel asked. Now I know. Now I understand why nothing else ever felt right. It's because this is where I belong. Here with you. Samuel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but they were good tears, tears of relief and warm and overwhelming love. I never thought I'd hear you say that. I never thought I'd be brave enough to say it. But you make me brave, Samuel. You always have. They fell asleep like that, tangled together on the couch, the movie long since ended, and the apartment quiet around them. Samuel woke up first as the early morning light filtered through the windows, and for a moment he panicked, wondering if the entire evening had been an elaborate dream. But then Jason stirred beside him, his arm tightening around Samuel's waist, and Samuel knew it was real. The next few days passed in a haze of careful exploration and tentative joy. They moved around each other differently now, with a new awareness that manifested in lingering touches and meaningful glances. Jason would brush his fingers against Samuel's as he handed him his morning coffee. Samuel would let his hand rest on Jason's shoulder a beat longer than necessary when he passed, behind his chair. They were learning the language of this new relationship, figuring out how to be lovers as well as friends. But it wasn't without its challenges. 3 days after their confession, Jason had a panic attack in the middle of the grocery store. They had been shopping for dinner, moving through the aisles with an easy domesticity that felt both natural and revolutionary, when Jason suddenly stopped in the middle of the pasta aisle, his face pale and his breathing shallow. "I can't do this," he said, his voice tight with panic. "Everyone's looking at us. They know. They can tell." Samuel looked around the nearly empty aisle, seeing only an elderly woman comparing prices on marinara sauce and a tired-looking father trying to wrangle two small children. No one was paying them any attention at all, but Samuel understood that Jason's fear wasn't really about the strangers in the grocery store. It was about the enormity of what they were doing, the way their entire world had shifted in the span of a few days. "Hey," Samuel said softly, moving closer to Jason but not touching him, understanding instinctively that physical contact might make the panic worse. "Look at me. Just look at me." Jason's eyes met his, wild and frightened. "Breathe with me," Samuel said, taking slow, deliberate breaths until Jason began to mirror him. "That's it, in and out, just like that." It took several minutes for Jason's breathing to return to normal, for the color to come back to his face. When it did, he looked around the aisle with embarrassment, as if seeing it clearly for the first time. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know what happened. I just suddenly felt like everyone was staring at us, judging us, and I couldn't breathe." "You don't have to apologize," Samuel said. "This is all new and scary. It's okay to be overwhelmed." "Is it always going to be like this?" Jason asked. "Am I always going to be afraid of what people think?" Samuel considered the question carefully before answering. "I don't know, maybe sometimes. But I think it gets easier as you get more comfortable with who you are, with what we are, and you don't have to figure it all out at once." They finished their shopping in relative quiet, Jason seeming subdued and thoughtful. That evening, as they cooked dinner together, he brought up the incident again. "I keep thinking about what my parents would say," he admitted as he stirred the pasta sauce. "My dad especially. He's not exactly what you'd call progressive when it comes to this stuff." Samuel felt his stomach clench. He had been so focused on the part of finally being with Jason that he hadn't fully considered all the external challenges they would face. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," Jason said quickly, turning to face him. "No, that's not what I meant. I love you, Samuel. That hasn't changed, and it's not going to change. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared about some of the practical stuff coming out, to family, to friends, to coworkers, dealing with people who might not understand or accept us." Samuel moved closer, reaching out to take Jason's hands. "We don't have to tell anyone until you're ready. There's no timeline we have to follow, no rules about how fast or slow we take this." "But I don't want to hide either," Jason said. "I don't want you to feel like I'm ashamed of what we have." "I could never think that," Samuel assured him. "I've been hiding my feelings for 2 years. I can be patient a little longer while you figure out how you want to handle things." Jason squeezed his hands. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You let me make you coffee in a Batman t-shirt," Samuel said, smiling at the memory. Jason laughed, the tension finally breaking. "Best decision I ever made." That night, they made love for the first time. It was tentative and sweet, full of whispered questions and gentle reassurances. Jason was nervous, his hands shaking as he touched Samuel, but there was wonder in his eyes, as if he couldn't quite believe this was real. "Is this okay?" he asked over and over, and each time Samuel answered with kisses and soft words of encouragement. Afterward, they lay tangled in Samuel's bed, Jason's head on his chest, both of them quiet and content. Samuel ran his fingers through Jason's hair, marveling at the fact that he was allowed to do this now, that Jason was his to touch and hold and love. "I never imagined it could feel like this," Jason said quietly. "Like what?" "So right, so natural. I spent so long thinking there was something wrong with me, that I was broken somehow because I couldn't make things work with Michelle or any of the others. But this feels like coming home." Samuel pressed a kiss to the top of Jason's head. "You're not broken. You never were. You were just looking in the wrong places." "I wasn't looking at all," Jason corrected. "You were right here the whole time, and I was too blind to see it." "You see it now. That's what matters." They were quiet for a while, listening to the sounds of the city outside their window. Samuel was drifting towards sleep when Jason spoke again. "Samuel? Hmm? I want to tell people. Not everyone, not all at once, but I want to start. I want to be able to hold your hand in public, to introduce you as my boyfriend, to stop pretending that you're just my roommate." Samuel's heart swelled at the word boyfriend, at the casual way Jason said it, as if he had been practicing. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I love you, and I want the world to know it." "Okay," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll start small. Maybe tell Andrew first. He's always been pretty open-minded." "Andrew's perfect," Jason agreed. "And then maybe my sister. She's been asking me for months why I haven't introduced her to Michelle, and now I can tell her it's because I was in love with someone else entirely." They made plans in whispers, talking about who they would tell first and how they would handle the more difficult conversations. Samuel felt a sense of anticipation building in his chest, an excitement about the future that he hadn't felt in years. For so long, he had been living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for his real life to begin. Now it finally was. 2 weeks later, they had their first real test as a couple. Jason's ex-girlfriend, Michelle, called, asking if they could meet for coffee to talk about getting back together. She had done some thinking during their break, she said, and she realized she had made a mistake. She wanted to work things out. Jason told Samuel about the call immediately, his face troubled as he hung up the phone. "What did you tell her?" Samuel asked, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the spike of anxiety in his chest. "I told her I'd think about it," Jason said, then quickly added, "Not because I'm actually considering it, but because I wasn't sure how to explain everything over the phone." Samuel nodded, understanding but still feeling unsettled. "So you're going to meet with her?" "I think I have to. I owe her an explanation, don't I? She deserves to know why I was so distant, why things didn't work out between us." "Are you going to tell her about us?" Jason was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the kitchen counter. "I don't know, maybe. It depends on how the conversation goes." Samuel felt a familiar twist of fear in his stomach. "And if she doesn't take it well? If she tries to convince you that this is just a phase? Or that you're confused?" "Then I'll tell her she's wrong," Jason said firmly. "Samuel, look at me." Samuel raised his eyes to meet Jason's, seeing nothing but certainty there. "I love you. I'm in love with you. That's not going to change because Michelle wants to get back together or because she might not understand what we have. You're not a phase or a rebound or an experiment. You're the person I want to be with." The words soothed some of Samuel's anxiety, but not all of it. "I know, I've been the other person before, the one who gets left behind when the real relationship comes calling." Jason moved closer, taking Samuel's face in his hands. "You're not the other person. You're the only person, the only one who matters." He kissed Samuel then, soft and reassuring, and Samuel let himself believe it, let himself trust in what they had built together. Jason met Michelle for coffee the next afternoon while Samuel tried to distract himself with work. He cleaned the apartment twice, reorganized his bookshelf, and started 3 different TV shows before giving up and pacing around the living room like a caged animal. When Jason finally came home 2 hours later, Samuel practically pounced on him. "How did it go?" Jason set his keys down on the counter and turned to face Samuel, his expression unreadable. "It was hard. Harder than I expected." Samuel's heart sank. "Hard how?" "She cried," Jason said simply. "A lot. And she asked me a lot of questions I wasn't sure how to answer." "Did you tell her about us?" "I told her I was in love with someone else. Someone I've been in love with for a long time, but was too scared to admit it. I didn't specifically mention that it was you, but she's smart. She probably figured it out." Samuel waited for more, but Jason seemed lost in thought. "And what did she say?" "She asked me if I was gay, just like that, straight out. And I realized I didn't know how to answer that question." The admission hit Samuel like a physical blow. "What do you mean you didn't know how to answer it?" Jason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Samuel recognized as a sign of stress. "I mean, I've never really thought about labels before. Am I gay? Am I bisexual? Does it matter? I know I love you, but I don't know what that makes me." "It makes you mine," Samuel said quietly. "Everything else is just semantics." Jason's expression softened. "Is it really that simple?" "It can be if you want it to be. You don't have to have all the answers right now, Jason. You don't have to fit into a neat little box just because other people are more comfortable with labels." "Michelle said she thinks I'm just confused, that I'm going through some kind of midlife crisis and using you as an escape from adult responsibility." Samuel felt anger flare in his chest. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her she was wrong, that what I feel for you isn't confusion or escapism. It's the most real thing I've ever experienced. That being with you doesn't feel like running away from my life. It feels like finally running toward it." The anger faded, replaced by a warmth that spread through Samuel's entire body. "You said that?" "I said that and more. I told her that I've spent years trying to force myself to feel for other people what I naturally feel for you. That every relationship I've ever had has been me trying to recreate what we have, and failing miserably." Jason moved closer, reaching for Samuel's hands. "I told her that I'm not confused about anything. I'm more certain about this than I've ever been about anything in my life." Samuel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "I love you." "I love you too, and I'm sorry if I scared you earlier. I know my uncertainty about labels probably made it sound like I was having doubts about us, but that's not what it was. I just need time to figure out how I want to identify myself to the world." "Take all the time you need," Samuel said. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, they lay in bed talking about identity and labels and the sometimes arbitrary ways society tries to categorize love. Jason admitted that he had never been attracted to men before Samuel, that he still wasn't sure if he was attracted to men in general or just to Samuel specifically. "Does that bother you?" And he asked, "that you might be the exception rather than the rule?" Samuel considered the question. "A little, maybe, but mostly it makes me feel special. Like I'm the one person who could break through all your walls and make you reconsider everything you thought you knew about yourself." "You are special," Jason said, his voice soft in the darkness. "You're the most special person in the world." They made love again that night, slower and more confident than before. Jason was less hesitant, more willing to explore and experiment. Afterward, as they lay catching their breath, he turned to Samuel with a smile. "I figured out what I want to tell people when they ask about labels," he said. "What's that?" "I'm going to tell them that I'm Jason, and I'm in love with Samuel Johnson. Everything else is nobody's business but ours." Samuel laughed, pulling Jason closer. "I like that answer." "Good, because it's the only one you're going to get." The following month brought a series of small revelations and adjustments as they settled into their new reality as a couple. They told Andrew first, as planned, over dinner at their favorite restaurant. Andrew's reaction was everything they had hoped for and more. "Finally," he said, throwing his hands up in exasperation. "Do you know how long I've been waiting for you two to figure this out? I was starting to think I was going to have to lock you in a closet together." "You knew?" Jason asked, looking stunned. "Of course I knew. Anyone with eyes could see the way you two looked at each other." Samuel's been pining after you for years, and you've been completely oblivious to your own feelings. It was painful to watch, honestly. Samuel felt his face heat up. Was I really that obvious? Only to everyone except Jason, Andrew said with a grin. But don't worry, your secret was safe. We all just figured you'd work it out eventually. We, Jason asked, the entire friend group. There might have been a betting pool about when you'd finally get together. I just won $50, by the way, so thank you for that. They left the restaurant that night feeling lighter, more confident in their relationship. If their friends had been waiting for this to happen, if it was so obvious to everyone else, then maybe they weren't as crazy or confused as they sometimes felt. Jason's sister was the next person they told, and her reaction was similarly positive. She hugged them both and immediately started planning a dinner party to celebrate, insisting that she had always known Jason needed someone who understood him the way Samuel did. Michelle was nice, she said, but she never got your sense of humor, and she definitely never made you light up the way you do when you talk about Samuel. I light up when I talk about Samuel? Jason asked, looking pleased. Like a Christmas tree, his sister confirmed. It's actually kind of disgusting how happy you two are together. The positive reactions from their friends and family gave them courage to be more open in other areas of their lives. They started holding hands in public, going on dates to restaurants and movies, introducing each other as boyfriends to new acquaintances. Each time got easier, and Samuel watched Jason grow more comfortable with their relationship, more confident in his own skin. There were still challenges, of course. Jason's parents were less accepting than his sister, and it took several difficult conversations before they began to come around. Samuel's own family was more supportive, but there were still awkward moments and well-meaning but hurtful comments from relatives who didn't quite understand. But through it all, they had each other. When Jason's father made a particularly cutting remark about phases and lifestyle choices, Samuel was there to hold him afterward, to remind him that his father's ignorance didn't diminish the validity of their love. When Samuel's grandmother asked when he was going to find a nice girl and settle down, Jason was there to squeeze his hand under the table and give him strength. They developed rituals and traditions that were uniquely theirs. Sunday morning coffee in bed became sacred, a time for them to reconnect and plan their week together. They started cooking elaborate dinners on Friday nights, trying new recipes and laughing when things inevitably went wrong. They took turns choosing movies for their weekly film nights, though Jason still had an unfair advantage when it came to winning their good-natured arguments. 3 months after their first kiss, Samuel woke up to find Jason already awake beside him, staring at the ceiling with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, his voice still rough with sleep. "Us," Jason said simply. "How different everything is now compared to 6 months ago." Good different or bad different? Jason turned to face him, his eyes soft with love. The best different. 6 months ago, I was lying to myself about what I wanted, trying to force myself into a life that didn't fit. Now I wake up every morning next to the person I love most in the world, and I get to call him mine. Samuel felt his heart swell with happiness. "You do get to call me yours, for as long as you want me." "Forever then," Jason said without hesitation. "I want to call you mine forever." "Forever sounds perfect," Samuel agreed, leaning in to kiss him. As they lay there in the early morning light, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. All those months of careful friendship, of hidden longing and unspoken feelings, had led to this perfect morning, this perfect love. He thought about the Samuel from 6 months ago, who had been so afraid of losing Jason's friendship that he was willing to sacrifice his own happiness, that Samuel could never have imagined that the risk would pay off so beautifully. "I have something to tell you," Jason said suddenly, breaking into Samuel's thoughts. Samuel felt a flutter of anxiety. "What?" "I've been thinking about what Andrew said, about how obvious it was to everyone that we belong together. And I realized that maybe it was obvious to me too, on some level. Maybe I always knew, but I was too scared to admit it." "What do you mean?" Jason propped himself up on his elbow, looking down at Samuel with an intensity that made his breath catch. "I mean that when I moved in here 2 years ago, I told myself it was because the rent was cheap and the location was convenient. But the truth is, I could have found a dozen other places that were just as affordable and just as convenient. I chose to live with you because I wanted to be close to you, even if I couldn't admit why. Samuel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Really? Really? And all those times I came to you for relationship advice, all those conversations about what was missing in my life, I think part of me was hoping you'd tell me what I was too scared to figure out on my own. That you were in love with me? That I was in love with you, Jason confirmed. That the reason nothing else ever felt right was because my heart already belonged to someone else. Samuel reached up to cup Jason's face, his thumb brushing across his cheekbone. I wish I had been braver. I wish I had told you how I felt sooner. We found our way here eventually, Jason said. That's what matters. Yeah, Samuel agreed. We did. They spent the rest of that morning in bed, talking and kissing and making love with a lazy contentment that spoke of deep familiarity and endless possibility. When they finally got up to make breakfast, they moved around the kitchen with an easy synchronicity that had developed over months of practice. Jason made the coffee while Samuel scrambled eggs, and they took turns reading interesting articles from the newspaper aloud to each other. It was during one of these peaceful Sunday mornings, about 4 months into their relationship, that Jason brought up the subject of the future. I've been thinking about us, he said as he buttered his toast, about where we're headed. Samuel looked up from his eggs, trying to read Jason's expression. And? And I want to make sure we're on the same page about things, about what we both want from this relationship. Samuel set down his fork, giving Jason his full attention. What do you want? Everything, Jason said simply. I want to build a life with you. I want to travel together and fight about whose turn it is to do the dishes and adopt a dog, and maybe even get married someday, if that's something you'd want. Samuel felt his heart skip a beat. You want to marry me? Not tomorrow, Jason said quickly, but someday, yeah. I want to stand up in front of our friends and family and promise to love you for the rest of my life. I want to make it official. Make it real in every way that matters. Samuel felt tears welling up in his eyes. I want that too. All of it. The traveling and the fighting and especially the marriage part. Jason grinned, reaching across the table to take Samuel's hand. Really? Really, I've been dreaming about a future with you since the day we met. I just never thought it was possible. It's possible, Jason said firmly. It's more than possible. It's inevitable. They talked for hours that morning about their hopes and dreams, about the kind of life they wanted to build together. They discussed practical things like career goals and financial planning, and romantic things like where they wanted to go on their honeymoon and what kind of wedding they might have. By the time the sun was high in the sky, they had mapped out a future that felt both ambitious and achievable. That afternoon, they went for a walk in the park near their apartment, holding hands and people watching. They stopped at a bench overlooking a small pond where families were feeding ducks, and Jason pulled Samuel down to sit beside him. Can I tell you something? Jason asked, his voice soft. Always. I used to be afraid that I was broken somehow, that there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made it impossible for me to love someone the way they deserve to be loved. Samuel squeezed his hand. And now? Now I know that I was just waiting for the right person. For you, you didn't fix me, Samuel, because I was never really broken. But you did help me understand who I really am, who I was always meant to be. Samuel felt his chest tighten with emotion. You helped me understand myself too. Before you, I thought love was supposed to hurt, supposed to be this constant ache of wanting something you couldn't have. You taught me that real love is supposed to feel like coming home. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ducks paddle around the pond and listening to the laughter of children playing nearby. Samuel felt a deep sense of contentment wash over him, a feeling of being exactly where he belonged. Samuel, Jason said eventually. Yeah? I missed us before life got busy. Samuel turned to look at him confused. What do you mean? Life isn't busy. We're sitting in a park on a Sunday afternoon doing absolutely nothing. Jason smiled, that soft, private smile that was reserved just for Samuel. I know, but someday it will be busy. Someday we'll have careers and responsibilities, and maybe kids. and we'll look back on days like this and miss how simple everything was. So you're missing something that hasn't even happened yet. I'm appreciating something that's happening right now, Jason corrected. I'm trying to memorize this moment, this feeling, so I can carry it with me always. Samuel felt his heart melt. I love you so much, it actually hurts sometimes. Good hurt or bad hurt? The best hurt. The kind of hurt that means you're fully alive, fully present, fully in love. Jason leaned over and kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against Samuel's and smiled. Then we're both exactly where we need to be. As they walked home that evening, Samuel reflected on how much their lives had changed in such a short time. 6 months ago, he had been living half a life, watching from the sidelines as the person he loved built a future with someone else. Now he was an active participant in his own story, writing a love story that was better than anything he could have imagined. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home to pick up ingredients for dinner, and Samuel watched Jason debate the merits of different pasta shapes with the serious concentration of someone making a life-altering decision. It was such a normal domestic moment, but it filled Samuel with a happiness so profound it took his breath away. This was what he had been waiting for all his life, he realized. Not just love, but this specific love, with this specific person, in this specific moment. All the pain and longing and uncertainty had been worth it to arrive at this place, this feeling, this perfect, ordinary evening in the grocery store with the man he loved. That night, as they cooked dinner together, Jason told Samuel about a conversation he had had with his coworker earlier that week. The coworker, a woman named Betty Walker, who worked in accounting, had been complaining about her husband's lack of emotional availability. She said she feels like she's married to a stranger, Jason explained as he stirred the pasta sauce. Like they share a house and a bank account, but they don't really know each other anymore. That's sad, Samuel said, tossing the salad. How long have they been married? 8 years. And the whole time she was talking, I kept thinking about how grateful I am that we're not like that we actually talk to each other, that we're interested in each other's thoughts and feelings. Samuel smiled. We've always been good at talking. Even when we were just friends, you were the person I wanted to tell everything to. When something good happened, you were the first person I wanted to share it with. When something bad happened, you were the first person I wanted comfort from. You still are, Samuel said. The first person I want to share everything with. Good, Jason said, moving closer to wrap his arms around Samuel from behind. Because I plan on being that person for the rest of your life. Samuel leaned back into Jason's embrace, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against his back. Promise? I promise, Jason murmured against his ear. Through busy times and quiet times, through good news and bad news, through everything life throws at us. I promise to always be the person you can tell everything to. They ate dinner by candlelight that night, talking about everything and nothing, laughing at Jason's terrible jokes and debating the merits of their favorite books. It was the kind of evening that would have seemed unremarkable to an outside observer, but to Samuel it felt precious and significant, another building block in the foundation of their shared life. After dinner, they settled on the couch to watch a movie, but neither of them paid much attention to the screen. Instead, they talked about their plans for the upcoming weekend, about a vacation they were considering, about whether they should get a cat or a dog when they were ready for a pet. Definitely a dog, Jason said firmly. Cats are too independent. I want a pet that will be excited to see us when we come home. Dogs are a lot of work, Samuel pointed out. They need walks and training and constant attention. So do relationships, and we seem to be managing that pretty well. Samuel laughed. Fair point. What kind of dog? Something medium-sized, big enough to cuddle with, small enough for apartment living. Maybe a golden retriever or a lab mix. You've really thought about this, haven't you? I've thought about a lot of things, Jason admitted. About the kind of life I want to build with you. The kind of home I want us to have. Samuel felt his heart skip a beat. What kind of home? Jason was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on Samuel's arm. Something that feels like us. Comfortable and welcoming. Full of books and music and good food. A place where our friends want to hang out. Where our families feel welcome. Where we can be completely ourselves. That sounds perfect, Samuel said softly. It does, doesn't it? And the best part is, we're already halfway there. This apartment, right now, with you, it already feels like home. Samuel turned in Jason's arms so he could look at him directly. You know what I love most about you? My devastating good looks and charming personality? Samuel laughed. Besides those obvious things, I love how you make everything feel possible. Before you, I felt like I was living in black and white. Now everything is in full color. Jason's expression grew serious. You do the same thing for me. You make me feel like the best version of myself. Like I can be brave and honest and open in ways I never thought possible. We're good for each other, Samuel observed. We're perfect for each other, Jason corrected. We're the kind of couple people write songs about. Speaking of which, Samuel said, reaching for his phone, Tomville, I made you a playlist. You made me a playlist? Jason's face lit up with delight. When? Last week. It's all the songs that remind me of you, of us, of how I feel when I'm with you. Samuel pulled up the playlist and hit play, and the opening notes of their favorite song filled the room. Jason's eyes went soft with emotion as he recognized the melody. This was playing the first night we kissed, he said. I know, that's why it's the first song on the list. They listened to the entire playlist together, Jason occasionally commenting on a particular song or asking Samuel why he'd chosen it. Some of the choices were obvious. Love songs with lyrics that perfectly captured their relationship. Others were more obscure, songs that held private meaning for Samuel, that reminded him of specific moments or conversations. This is the most romantic thing anyone's ever done for me, Jason said when the last song ended. It's just a playlist. It's not just a playlist, it's a love letter. It's you telling me in the most beautiful way possible how you feel about us. Samuel felt his cheeks warm. I'm glad you like it. I don't like it, Jason said, pulling Samuel closer. I love it, almost as much as I love you. Almost? Okay, fine. I love it exactly as much as I love you, which is more than I ever thought it was possible to love anything. They made love that night with a tenderness that took Samuel's breath away. Jason touched him like he was something precious, something to be treasured and protected. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Jason whispered words of love and devotion that Samuel knew he would remember for the rest of his life. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the next 50 years, Jason said, his voice soft and drowsy. Only 50? Samuel teased. Fine, 60, 70, however long we get, I want to spend all of it with you. Deal, Samuel said, pressing a kiss to Jason's shoulder. But I'm holding you to that. I'm counting on it, Jason replied, his arm tightening around Samuel's waist. As Samuel drifted off to sleep, he thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. All the months of hidden feelings and careful friendship, all the fear and uncertainty and hope, had led to this perfect ending that was really just the beginning of their story together. He thought about the Samuel from a year ago, who had been so afraid of losing Jason's friendship that he was willing to sacrifice his own happiness. That Samuel could never have imagined that taking the risk, being brave enough to love openly and honestly, would lead to something so beautiful. And he thought about Jason, who had been brave enough to question everything he thought he knew about himself, brave enough to follow his heart even when it led him somewhere unexpected. Jason, who had chosen love over fear, authenticity over comfort, truth over convenience. They had found their way to each other despite all the obstacles, despite their own fears and insecurities and the expectations of the world around them. They had built something real and lasting and beautiful, something worth fighting for and protecting and celebrating. As sleep finally claimed him, Samuel's last conscious thought was of gratitude. Gratitude for Jason's courage, for his own persistence, for the friends who had supported them and the family who had accepted them. Gratitude for second chances and new beginnings and the incredible power of love to transform everything it touches. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new adventures, new opportunities to grow and learn and love each other better. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. They were exactly where they needed to be, exactly who they were meant to be, exactly as happy as two people could possibly be. And in the quiet of their shared bedroom, With the city lights filtering through the curtains and the sound of Jason's steady breathing in his ear, Samuel Johnson knew that he had finally found his home. Not in a place, but in a person. Not in a dream, but in a reality that was better than any dream he had ever dared to have. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility, and Samuel couldn't wait to see what came next.